Hello Channel NITT viewers, I am DS, your psychologist, and welcome to another episode on Channel NITT. So very quickly, in my previous video, I mentioned that I am getting more incoherent than before. So this could be because I am so used to doing the same type of videos. So I am making use of this video to work on my clarity. So hopefully with a change in the content of what I am presenting, I can now consciously work on my clarity. So the topic of this video is classical conditioning, and this is an intermediate video. So this video will be suitable for psychology students and psychology learners and viewers who are intelligent and really interested in knowing about psychology. So you will definitely benefit from this video. So viewers, if you think that I have improved, or if you like this video, do remember to give me a like so that I know that I have done well for this video, because this is a conscious effort to want to do better for the channel. And of course, if you have not subscribed, do consider subscribing so that we can bring you more of this psychology content. Okay, I presume that many viewers are watching this because you are interested in classical conditioning. So many viewers will already know that classical conditioning is discovered by Ivan Pavlov. So classical conditioning is the process in which an organism learns to associate a neutral stimulus with a conditioned stimulus. Ivan Pavlov discovered classical conditioning by chance actually. So Ivan Pavlov had many dogs in his laboratory. They were meant for a different type of experiment. However, whenever he serves the dogs with food, he would ring a buzzer before that to signify that the food is arriving or the food has come. By chance, Pavlov observed that as soon as the bell or the buzzer was rung or sounded, the dog started salivating even before the presentation of the food. He calls this classical conditioning. So let's look at how it really works. So dogs naturally salivate when food is presented. The buzzer or the bell is actually what we call a neutral stimulus. This means that on its own, the bell or the buzzer does not cause salivation. However, with consistent pairing of the bell ringing before the food is presented, dogs learned that, hey, food is going to come. So they salivate when the bell is sounded. So when answering application questions to do with classical conditioning, many students got it wrong because they got the concept wrong. When giving examples of classical conditioning, students are sometimes unable to give correct examples. First, you need to know that when classical conditioning is concerned, there are a few prerequisites that must be satisfied. First, there must be a neutral stimulus. This stimulus on its own does not elicit a physiological response. So in this case of Ivan Pavlov, the buzzer itself does not elicit salivation. The next condition is that this neutral stimulus must be presented either before or at the same time as the conditioned stimulus. So in Pavlov's experiments, food is presented after the bell is sounded.
See, Jerry likes it.
However, it is also possible for the neutral stimulus and the conditioned stimulus to come at the same time, as in the case of the Gaussian effect. Now what is the Gaussian effect? The Gaussian effect is very simple to understand. Presume you want to poison rats. You might lace the food that you leave in the open to attract the rats with some laxatives. So when the rats actually take the bait, they will have a very horrible experience with their food. It makes them really uncomfortable. So in this case, let's say you deliberately lace a leftover pizza with laxatives and then you attract the rat to come over. The pizza itself is the neutral stimulus because on its own, the pizza doesn't cause tummy upset or diarrhea. Since you put the pizza together with the laxative, the rat immediately learns by classical conditioning that they need to avoid the pizza in the future. So next time if you have leftover food in the house, the rats may not come because they learned an important lesson. That is to avoid food on the table. So Gaussian effect also works on a human being. Presume you go to the hawker center and you ate some laksa from a particular food store and you had a very bad episode of diarrhea. You will avoid that store in the future. This is because you learned by classical conditioning that that store sells bad food. So that brings us to our third prerequisite for classical conditioning to happen, and that is there must be a physiological reaction or physiological response. So in Ivan Pavlov's case, the physiological response is salivation, but physiological responses can also come in other forms, such as blinking of the eye, a knee-jerk, erection, arousal, fear, breaking out in cold sweat, sneezing, or even coughing. These are some physiological reactions that could potentially be classically conditioned. So in the examination, when I asked about classical conditioning, a lot of students gave really bad examples of classical conditioning happening in real life. So one very good example of this is the Nike branding. So the Nike branding is so strong that every time now you just see the tick and just do it, you will think of Nike. Personally, I think this is a bad example because the three prerequisites of classical conditioning are not exactly met. First, where is the physiological response? So another student might say, okay, whenever I look at the pendant that my grandmother gave me, I miss her, I feel love. So there is a physiological response this time, and that is missing, that is love. Is this correct as an example of classical conditioning? No. No, the answer is no.
So let it go.
Now why is that the case? Let me give you a parallel example to this. I broke up with my girlfriend some time ago, and immediately 2 or 3 days later on her Facebook she started flashing photographs of her with her new boyfriend. This makes me very angry, and they are eating at a particular fish restaurant. So it is very natural for me to associate the fish restaurant with feelings of anger because of this incident. But this is not classical conditioning. This is how I program my brain. Of course, some students can really force this argument across, but I think that this is really a very bad example of classical conditioning. Actually, to explain this, I would say that this is an example of spreading activation. So in our brain, we store information in what cognitive psychologists would call nodes. So take for example, let's say doctor is one of the information that we store in our brain. So here you can see the word doctor. We associate doctors with the following: nurse, hospital, white robe, and medication. So when you think about a doctor, the node doctor is activated, and immediately the energy spreads through spreading activation to all the surrounding nodes. So this process of learning is very cognitive and mental. There is no emotional or physiological response involved. So therefore, it does not fulfill the criterion of classical conditioning. So back to the case of the grandmother and the pendant. So this is a very good example because in your brain, the grandmother is a node and it is linked to the node of the pendant, and when the pendant is activated, naturally it will flood over to your grandmother and all the memories associated with your grandmother. That is why you may feel anger, anguish, or sadness or love whenever you see the pendant. So spreading activation is a much better example of explaining this phenomenon and not classical conditioning. And of course, the spreading activation model will be the model you use to explain how come you associate the tick symbol with Nike and just do it. It's just how we store information in the brain, nothing to do with classical conditioning. So students, if you really have to give a practical example of classical conditioning, then consider the following. The Gaussian effect is a very good example. Otherwise, another practical example that you can use is the enuresis mat. So take note of these two words and go and do your own research on it. We will not discuss this in this episode. So viewers, whether you are psychology students or just viewers, I hope that you found this change in presentation and content refreshing, because I realized that if I continue to do the videos that I am used to do, then there is no breakthrough. So in my next video, I'm going to talk about another psychological topic that many people will be very interested in, and that is the theory of love. So do watch out for that. So if you have not subscribed, do support us by subscribing. We really appreciate your support and we really need your support. Okay, I really hope that you have learned something from this video, and I'm going to sign off now, and I'll see you in my next episode. Goodbye!